Let's go to the spin room now to where Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is standing by with our Alex Wagner. Alex.
Thanks, Rachel. Governor, thank you for wading through the scrum to join me here. Let's talk about what happened on that debate stage, starting, I think, probably with Governor Walz's strongest answer, which unfortunately came at the very end, but I'm optimistic that people followed this through the 90 minutes, talking about January 6th, what happened at the Capitol, and also the certification of the 2020 election. He wouldn't say who won the election. He said, I want to talk about the future. He basically suggested that Trump's interest in all the lawsuits that he filed, or allies of his filed, was about an open conversation about the election. I mean, I think Governor Walz gave the line of the night when he said, Mike Pence isn't on the stage. Where is the firewall now? This person suggesting that, you know, J.D. Vance was not going to do the thing that Mike Pence did, importantly, which is stand up to Donald Trump as he tries to subvert democracy. What did you think about that moment, and how much do you think that now is in the forefront of voters' minds heading into the last stretch of the election?
This election is about the future of our democracy. And so that's why that question was so important, even if it came at the very end.
Yeah.
Because what you heard was J.D. Vance not willing to say that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. I mean, how can you actually think that that person should be vice president of the United States if he can't even admit what is true? Because, well, he's the mini-me for Donald Trump, who can't live up to the idea or can't, you know, tell the truth about the 2020 election. So I think that we're you know, this was the perfect frame for the rest of the debate. If you look back at the rest, what you'll see is a slick debater in J.D. Vance who consistently could not answer a question. He just kept shifting. And we all know, for example, let's talk about health care. We all know that Donald Trump and the Republicans tried to, well, pull back and end Obamacare.
Yeah.
Right? And over and over again, they tried to do that. And yet, that's not what you heard from J.D. Vance. It was Tim Walz who had to call him out on it and make sure that he, you know, was answering for the idea that, you know, they want to take away the coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. They want to take away coverage for, you know, your 26-year-olds and under who are covered by the ACA. That over and over, you heard lies and kind of slick answers from J.D. Vance. And you know what you heard from Tim Walz? It was a guy who is like you trust, that lives down the street from you, the coach that you had in high school that you trusted, the teacher that you could confide in, and just he spoke in a way that I think everyday Americans, you know, the working families of America really understand.
Are you at all surprised that there were, I think, a number of moments in this debate where J.D. Vance was trying to, I guess, burnish his credentials as an empath and suggest that he cared about the struggles? He was more bipartisan in posture than perhaps you'd seen him in other media appearances. You know, he tried to agree, at least notionally, with Governor Walz on some things, even though obviously these two tickets are diametrically opposed on substantive policy issues. But, I mean, do you think that's going to convince anybody? Because, as you say, he is a fairly slick orator. He was very rehearsed, but it was also, you know, a slightly different posture than one he's taken before.
Look, he's a slick orator for sure, but you saw a lot of inconsistencies, and his whole history is a list of inconsistencies. The guy hasn't held a job for more than 2 years. He hasn't been able to keep the same views on things. Remember, he called Donald Trump America's Hitler. He called Donald Trump a Nazi just a few years ago. Now he's his running mate and his mini-me, repeating all of the lines of Donald Trump and defending Donald Trump. So what is it about him? It's that he wants to achieve power. He wants to get in positions, but he is willing to, well, compromise himself and any morals or, you know, ethos that he may have ever had in his life in order to get there. That's been the problem for J.D. Vance, and that's why he's so unpopular with the American public.
Yeah, he has historically high unpopularity. That is certainly true. I was struck by his, I mean, just how candid he was in terms of the problem Republicans understand themselves to have on the issue of abortion. He at one point said, we have got to do a much better job on abortion, and also said, not all Americans agree with what I've said before, which is the litany of strange and weird proclamations on everything to what postmenopausal women should be doing to the age at which women should be having children. First of all, that seems to reflect, broad thinking inside the GOP that they are hemorrhaging voters on this topic. What did you think of his concession to how badly the party's doing on the topic?
Well, I remember what he was really saying. He was basically saying, well, trust me and trust Donald Trump, right? We'll do the right thing. Trust us. And you heard Tim Walz say, we trust women. That's what Democrats stand for. That's what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz stand for. So I thought that contrast was very, very clear. And yeah, the Republican Party has a lot to answer for, because the deaths that Tim Walz is talking about of women who aren't able to get the kind of reproductive services that they deserve because doctors feel like they might go to prison if they perform those services, because it's been criminalized in so many states. I mean, I'm in Illinois, where we've had to create an oasis for people because every state around us has criminalized or gotten rid of abortion services. So people are traveling hundreds of miles, unfortunately, but at least they have a place to go to protect themselves. Tim Walz believes that the entire country should be the haven for women. You should be able to go to your local hospital or your local doctor and get the reproductive services you deserve, whereas Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are okay with people dying in the parking lot.
Well, right. And J.D. Vance at one point expresses effectively condolences for Amber Thurman, the woman in Georgia who died because she had to leave that abortion desert, go get care in North Carolina, and died in effectively the back and forth of treatment. But then also, on the same hand, J.D. Vance says, but I think the abortion decision is best left to the states.
Well, this is like everything with the Republicans, right? Their policies lead to people's deaths, and then they say, oh, thoughts and prayers. Right? This is the same thing about a ban on assault weapons, which is what we need in the United States, what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris want for the people of the United States and to protect our children. Right? And what do they say on the other side? Oh, thoughts and prayers when people die. But they do absolutely nothing to protect our children and protect people on the streets who are being gunned down by AR-15s.
Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, sir, thank you for taking time out of the mosh pit to come visit me. Good luck in there.
Great to see you.
Back to you, Rachel.